And we are live. Good evening. And thank you for joining us again. Thanks for coming back, Coaching You For You family. I am Annette, and I am your host here at Coaching You For You. Tonight, I have a very special guest. But before I get started, I'd like to offer my condolences to every family everywhere who's suffering a loss. Having just gone through it again, for like the 11th time in 10 years. I get it.
Right.
And I just want to tell you that I wish you the peace of God through this. And I hope that you'll have enough of everything that you will need to transition through this process. And so I'm here tonight with a very special guest. She's a sister, an AKA sister, and a friend. And we're here tonight to discuss a few things. But before we introduce our topic, I'd like Angela Dodson, Angela P. Dodson to be exact, to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her.
Hi, I am Angela P. Dodson. I am a resident of Trenton. I'm a West Virginia native. I've lived all over the country, actually, though, until settling here quite accidentally. I am a longtime journalist. I worked at 5 or 6 newspapers, including the New York Times. I've worked for magazines. I've worked for websites. The last 10 or 12 years, I've had my own business, freelance writing, editing books, ghostwriting books, and that editing websites for that matter, that sort of thing. I'm the author of a book, Remember the Ladies, Celebrating Those Who Fought for Freedom at the Ballot Box. And I wrote the introduction to another book, Jailed for Freedom. That's the 100th anniversary edition of a book that came out in 1920 about the militant version of the women's movement. I like to I sing in local choirs here to the Holy Cross Catholic Church Parish Choir and the Gospel Music Workshop of America Central New Jersey Choir. I like to collect art.
And by the way, you have a phenomenal art collection. Perhaps sometime soon we'll be able to walk through and take the guests through that to see it in one of the series that I hope you will participate in.
We could do that. I've been collecting with my husband for 40 years. We each came to the marriage with several dozen collections of stuff, but major art in the last few decades. We've kind of stopped collecting now and trying to figure out where it's going to go if anything were to happen to us. And we collect other things, antiques, prints, what they used to call Negrobilia, Aunt Jemima, Uncle Rastus figures. You might find anything in my house, cream of wheat posters, etc. So those are some of the things I do. I like to cook very well.
What's your favorite meal?
Probably broiled salmon, maybe yellow rice, and a salad. I love to cook salads. They make salads for myself, for people, for potluck. That's what I'm usually asked to bring.
Okay.
So that would probably be an ideal. Maybe steamed asparagus with that, or roasted asparagus with that would be my favorite meal. And I like to line dance. I had been taking classes regularly until the COVID, and I hope to get back to that.
I hope to get back to dancing, period. Bad back, very bad back.
Right.
So
and back to the gym too, So.
Yeah, I want to thank you. I have a small gym in my house. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. And we are here to talk about remembering the ladies because I think it's important. And not only is it important, it's timely, considering that we have an election coming up and there's so many women storming the ballot box, for lack of a better term. But tell me, what do you do for, fun and play as a woman who means business? And so that we're clear, Coaching You For You family, a woman who means business is simply a woman with a mindset and a lifestyle that adds to and contributes to others' success. What do you do for fun?
Well, I think that, I mentioned some things, but also I like to travel and go to the spa sometimes too.
Okay.
Came back from my annual retreat with some women friends in Cape May, where we've been going for 30 years, apparently. We've been going to the same hotel for 30 years.
How
And
cool is that?
some of them went to someplace else before that, before I started going. So
How cool is that?
I'm shopping is a great interest.
Who doesn't like to shop? Although I am, in fact, on a shopping fast and was interrupted by a girlfriend, Nabila Ishmael,
Mm-hmm.
who convinced me to buy some green cowboy boots. They are phenomenal. I'm going to send them to you so that you can look at them and see what they look like and how she was able to so easily persuade me to
Right.
buy them as well as some other things. But I'm back on my fast.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
remember,
I do that during Lent. I stopped shopping for Lent.
okay,
So,
I want to stop shopping for 6 months. Now, I said I want to. It is my goal, not making a commitment. I'm looking at it a
right.
day at a time. And so, hey, thanks for joining us. Coaching You for You family. I present to some and introduce to others the author of Remembering the Ladies, Angela P. Dodson. Tell us about this book, how you got started and why.
Remember the Ladies was basically assigned to me. I had my husband is also a writer. He had been asked to write a book on Obama's legacy now, like 5 years ago, and I helped him edit it. And when he finished, the editor asked me, and it was an editor I've worked with at that company for some time. That's who I do some of my ghost writing and editing projects for. And she said, "Well, is there anything you want to write?" And I proposed like 2 or 3 different things to her, I think. And she rejected them all. She said, "Well, we have this women's suffrage centennial coming up in 2020, and we need a book out there um, from our company that represents this subject." And she said, what could you do about that?" And I looked at her like, I know nothing about this subject, but I am a history buff. And I've read a lot of history, so I thought I could do this. So I started doing the research myself to just enough to write a proposal for her to present to her colleagues at the company to get this signed on. And I became so fascinated with all the characters and all the things that I was learning about the movement. And, I really, most of us don't know much about women's history in America, period. We learn something about Betsy Ross, maybe Sojourner Truth, if we're lucky, Sacagawea, if we're lucky, Pocahontas, maybe, and Eleanor Roosevelt. That's it. That's the entire breadth of our knowledge about women in America. Maybe Martha Washington, Dolly Madison, somebody. But when I started learning about who the actual suffragists were, and also how they started out, what my book deals with a lot is how it was so intertwined with the abolitionist movement, which a lot of people don't know, and white books don't stress. But a lot of these people who started the suffragist movement already knew each other. And the way they knew each other was that they were abolitionists and they had worked together. And they'd worked together on something called the Free Produce Movement that I had never heard of. That was people boycotting anything made by slave labor. So a lot of the early suffrage leaders were leaders in that movement, including Black people. That's how they knew the Black people. That's how the white people knew people in the Black community, and they helped them start abolitionist organizations. So all of them were like the people who planned the first suffrage conventions and who came together for all these. They would like go to a suffrage convention one day and an abolitionist convention the next day and a temperance movement convention the next day. And it was a strange mix of white and Black and people that you would never have expected. Frederick Douglass emerges as one of the first leaders in the woman suffrage movement, for instance. Those are the things that caught my attention, and then I tried to put into the book proposal. We got it sold. The company bought onto it. All I had to do was finish researching and writing it. And we started this process probably in 2017 or thereabouts. The book came out in 2019. and we had hoped for, really big push during 2020. And then along came COVID. I mean, I did a lot of speaking engagements and stuff before COVID. And I was in the middle of a tour the week that we shut down here in New Jersey. When I got back here from Oberlin, Ohio, I did one more event at the Trent House here. And that was it for months until people figure out, hey, we can start doing some of this stuff virtually. So, I did some events with museums or bookstores or whatever across the country that way, libraries. So,
Okay. So you said something I thought was extremely interesting. And that was one of the first people in the suffrage movement was a man.
Mhm.
Well,
It with women called in Seneca Falls Convention, which some people may be familiar with, called a convention in 1838 about women's suffrage, and I think I got that date right. I might be off, but anyway, a handful of people called it, and it was very quickly called. It was like they met in early July and called this convention for mid-July. And Douglas advertised it in his newspaper, for instance. People often say Black women weren't invited to Seneca Falls. It wasn't an invitation-only event, but it was publicly advertised. And I submit if they didn't want Black people to come, they wouldn't have taken it to a Black newspaper. But it was advertised in some other newspapers. And some historians even think Black women were there, but they're just not recorded as being there. Frederick Douglass shows up, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, unbeknownst to some of her other white Quaker friends, had drafted a resolution asking for the vote for women. A lot of Quaker people thought that this was heresy because they don't vote anyway. Or basically, most of them don't believe in that as a form of expression, of whatever. So no one else spoke in favor of the resolution except Frederick Douglass. And he did so quite eloquently and carried the day. It passed. It did not pass unanimously as some of the resolutions did, but it passed. So he also wrote about the movement, wrote about that meeting afterwards.
Okay.
And he stayed active in the women's movement forever until the day he died. He had been at a women's convention the day he died and was acting it out or telling his wife about it. And she thought he was playing when he fell on the ground or whatever, telling the story, but he'd had a heart attack or stroke or something. So
interesting. Very, very interesting. And so what you've told us what encouraged you to write the book.
Mm-hmm.
You've also talked about your love of history.
Right.
And you shared something that I didn't know, and I don't know everything. And that's why I enjoy chatting with folks because I learn and I can learn something from everybody. And so I appreciate that little tidbit about the suffrage and, the invitation to the Black newspapers would not have been probably issued had they not intended for it to be a mixed audience,
Right.
for Black women to be there. And so I like that because I have a new series. It falls under Coaching You For You, as does Women Who Means Business, and it's called the Black Girls Locker Room.
Wow.
And and some of the things we're going to talk about is common law trademarked at this point because it's such a popular name. However, it's common law trademarked, and we intend to talk and share and hear the stories of women who have experienced strength and hope to share about, what we can do better. We're going to be doing makeovers with women. We're going to be, again, women are going to be sharing their stories. We're going to have dating coaches on for women who are single. We're going to have married folks on for people who are married, to share their experience, strength, and hope. We're going to have people, executives on, who can share about how you better advance at the office. And we're going to have people on who promote events. to tell you how it works. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things, and we're going to be touring in this. And I'd like to ask if at some point you would consider a part of this is sharing some of the history you know. I think it'll help some women understand, number one, why democracy and being involved is so important. But in writing this book, what would you say was your greatest experience? Remembering the ladies. You got a copy of that book anywhere?
I'm going to show. Right. This is Remember the Ladies. You can, where am I? You can get it on Amazon. It's in paperback now. I don't know if you can get this hardback that I'm showing. But it's easily available.
I have the hardback. I got
Right.
one of your copies.
Right.
So
If you're in Trenton, you can also get some copies at Classic Books.
okay. And so that's how you get the book. But so come on, tell us what was one of the most exciting parts about writing this book? I mean, when you got into it, what really turned you on about it? Because you're a history buff and because you had to do some research, it wasn't a topic that you were automatically familiar with. What excited you when you got into the book?
I think that every day there was a new discovery.
Okay.
And there were interesting subjects that the book is not traditional. It's broken into very short chapters and what we call sidebars, like you'd have in a magazine where there's another little subject over here and another little subject over there. Right. And the publisher would keep asking for a sidebar on this. Like I had to write a sidebar on what the suffrage movement and the Republican Party had to do with each other. I didn't know what that was, and there's like a whole sidebar on Douglas. There's a sidebar on Sojourner Truth. There's one of my favorite people is a white Quaker lady from Philadelphia called Lucretia Mott. So there's a sidebar on her. She's one of the people who had been working with the abolitionists since forever and is supposed to have radicalized some other abolitionists. So people like that. And then there's another white woman who's not Quaker, Lucy Stone, who becomes really, really active in the movement. And when the movement split over whether to fight for Black men's rights to vote first or give women's rights the vote first, some of the white women decided to split off and work only on their own vote. Lucy Stone started an organization that would work on getting Black men to vote first and then getting white women or all women to vote. So she was very interesting to me. And it was just the thing of discovery. Every day there was discoveries. And one of the things I was thinking about this recently, one of the things that kept me going is every day I would write down the word count, where I started, where I finished, because it had to be something like 75,000 words.
For the whole book?
For the whole book. So you start one day and you say, oh, okay, I finished 3,000. I finished 4,000. I finished 5,000. And then one day you're looking at, okay, I'm up to 60.
Here I come.
What else have I got to do? So, it's an interesting process. Or, and then when I turn it in, they say, and the book company doesn't seem to mind if you go over that limit. Would you write a little bit more about this? Could you tell me a little bit more about that? So it was, very fascinating. The whole way through was just there was everything in here. There's drama, there's divorce, there's murders, there's anything you can think of is in this book. I had to learn about the temperance movement. I learned that Americans used to drink much, much more than we do today because they were often paid in liquor. That's how you started drinking on Friday night.
Now that's interesting.
That's right. But it's a women's issue because if you had a drunk husband in an era where women had no rights, this is a serious problem because you can't work. You're dependent on him. And if he is cruel or whatever, you can't divorce him. You can't leave him. You can't get your children away from him because you can't get custody of your children. So
that was then.
Right. So drunkenness was a serious problem in America. at the time.
It still is.
Right. Right. But you have more avenues of legality and whatever to get out of a situation now.
Right.
They didn't have it. So,
Angela, I'd like to thank you for sharing with us tonight about your book.
well, thank you.
I'd like to thank you for coming on. I mean, you shared some things that I'm sure a lot of people who will view this don't know. And that's always what matters. I'd like to thank you for taking the time. I'd like to thank the audience that jumped in and out. And I'd like to thank the audience to come. We will be live on YouTube. You can pick her up on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. Angela has something to tell you, and she started tonight with Remembering the Ladies. I am grateful that I have a signed copy of that book, a hardback. So, Angela, thank you. And as we can see in your background, you are a lover of books.
Yes, I have thousands of books in this house.
That's
Only a fraction of them happen to be piled on my desk or some.
And that's a great place to be.
Right.
Hey, Coaching You For You family, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. I'd like to remind you that on Sundays, Coaching You For You at Women Who Mean Business will be on Sundays. The Black Girls Locker Room will air on Sundays as well. So it will be either or. WWMBA, Women Who Means Business, Who Mean Business, which Angela is. Remember, a woman who means business is a woman with a mindset and a lifestyle that speaks, acts, and works for her success as well as others. The Black Girls Locker Room is about the strategy. It's about motivating. It's about celebrating Black women and girls. And you know how the halftime show is on football? I love football. And at halftime, they go back to the locker room to regroup. And that's exactly what we're doing with the Black Girls Locker Room. We're regrouping and we're coming back stronger and better than ever. And we're going to win because solidarity wins. Angela, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope to see you again soon in this series of Women Who Means Business. And hopefully, we'll get a chance to explore a little bit more of this book because I'm excited about the things that you've shared relative to it. And then we'd like to take a walk, maybe through one of your very long tables. She has a huge house, and see some of those memorabilia that you have that speaks to our history and some of the things we've experienced and or produced.
Good. Could I just say one thing? We didn't get to what I'm working on next. I would like to quickly say my main project is that I'm working on an anthology of women writers about the killing of Black men. It's called Let the Women Speak on the Killing of Black Men. Wow. And I have basically been trying to sell this idea for 8 years since Michael Brown died. And then it didn't sell. And I started rewriting it without even telling my agent I was rewriting it after George Floyd died because it was COVID and we had nothing else to do. So I produced the book proposal by the end of the summer, and she said, yes, I think we can sell it now. Now they know what we're talking about. So I am collecting writers at the moment. I had 20 women writers committed to it before I submitted it the first time. Most of them have reconfirmed, or I haven't found them yet. And I'm working on a wish list of writers that I'm trying to track down. And it should come out either next year or early 2024.
A Woman Who Means Business. It's a lifestyle and a mindset. I'm looking forward to that book, Angela. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hosting you again. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. I'd like to wish you all a very good night, and we'll see you next Sunday at either Women Who Mean Business Association, WWMBA, or the Black Girls Locker Room, where solidarity wins, all under the head of Coaching You For You. Thank you and have a good evening. Thank you, Sir Angela.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.